Hello and welcome to this video on the NANO Modules Performance Mixer, a Eurorack performance mixer with inbuilt motion looping and knob recording. It's a really powerful feature that I've never seen before. Let's check out what's to come. This video is sponsored by NANO Modules. Now the performance mixer has all the standard kind of performance mixer controls you'd think, but the main thing is this knob recording. There's 12 knob or motion looping recorders that are built into the mixer. The 4 auxiliary controls, 4 level controls and 4 pan controls can all have motion loops built up simply by holding record and wiggling the faders or the knobs. It's a really powerful addition to the mixer that I've not seen anywhere before, never mind Eurorack. So that's heavily what I'll focus on here in the video, but we'll also just go through how I like to make patches and Eurorack mixing, with the odd production technique thrown in there as well. So let's quickly run down the features before I put some patch cables in here and do that with some sound and demonstrate the features. Our first 2 channels are mono, they have an input, and then CV over the auxiliary, the volume or level, and pan. Controls for auxiliary, which go to the X or the Y send, it's one or the other. Then we have our pan control, level fader, a Q switch to route to the Q bus, and then our recorder, mute. And nicely that mute happens when you let go of the button. So if you wanted to grab a few and then let go to change a mix, it's a bit more performative that way around. Channels 3 and 4 lose their auxiliary CV, but you gain that back on the expander if you add that to the mixer. They have left and right inputs, and then CV over volume and the balance. Again, the control set's the same. On the back of the unit, there's some switches to set plus 6 dB on the volumes, so if you'd like a bit more gain and level on those sliders, you can have. And then we come across to this auxiliary section where we have our X and Y mono send, and then X and Y stereo returns. You can set both X and Y to be pre or post on these switches, and they have their own return level controls. We have our main left and right output, our Q output, which again is set by these switches, and that will route anything pre-fader to the Q section, so you can cue something without having it active in the mix. We have our headphone out with headphone level and the Q mix, so you can choose what you're listening to if you'd like to cue up something or listen to the main output or a blend of, and our master volume control. On the expander, we get direct stereo outputs that are post-channel here, so if you want to use them as stereo VCAs and panners, you can do. You get mute controls, where any high voltage will mute the channel, and you can still override that with the mute buttons if you like. Again, we'll do this in the video. And you gain back your auxiliary CVs for channel 3 and 4 that are lost to that right-hand input for stereo inputs. So with a bit of patching, we're recording the main output, I have a sound into 1, and I have my XY sends set up as well. Here's my patch. A slightly driven, low-pass gate, complicated FM type voice. Now let's get into this motion recording. You simply hold record. So we'll start with a simple volume swell. And you can hear that's now just coming up and down. It's recorded and is looping the motion. Let's hold record and add some panning. Bit extreme, but you can hear this swaying around if you can't get some headphones on. We could record all 3 at the same time or keep kind of overdubbing them. Loop to the sends. Loop to the pan. And a loop to the level. So from a simple input or an already complex input, it creates a whole range of motion. Here we're creating a parallel kind of enhancer bus with compression and EQ using the CEQ module, with motion recording some panning, and randomly shifting in some send effects. This patch started with some drums. Nice and simple here, coming into channel 2, and we'll come back to its auxiliary send modulation shortly. Then track 1 is a bass from the NANO module's Honor into font. The green trace there, the less rhythmically dense one, modulates the filter, and my clocked yellow envelope is what's actually modulating the channel. So you can just hear that drone through. So by using this envelope here into level, this channel is serving like an end of chain VCA for this synth voice. Now the blue trace there is modulating the filter cutoff, as well as the auxiliary send. So what happens is, when a larger random voltage opens up the filter, it also fires it off to the delay. And these are currently set to be post with the level up full. If they're set to pre, you can hear that sounds can come through because it's pre the actual channel controls. Going to channel 4, this is a stereo input, basic saw wave into a low pass gate, and I'm using some LFO and offset modulation here to create this pulsing tremolo-like effect. And then holding record, I'll motion record some panning where it sways slowly and then fast to left and right. And hopefully that's obvious, and whatever you're listening to, grab some headphones if not. So then my third channel is what I'm calling my, quote, enhancer channel. It's the CEQ here, and I'm using the Q bus, purple cables, so coming out of the Q, into the CEQ, and then back to channel 3. And this is processing whatever we switch into the queuing. You don't have to use Q like you're queuing, say, a headphone mix. I'm actually using it here as a kind of separate bus to process through. If I send through my drums, you can hear that high level of compression and EQ compared to the dry sound if I just mix this in slowly. That's dry drums on 2. And then lots of my core enhancer channel mixing in parallel there. And with the mix without it, let's then fade some in. The bass really thickens up. A bit more bite on those drums with the EQ. We can hear my random voltages firing off both the drums and the synthesizer voice on channel 1 there, out into my delay and back. So here I'm using the performance mixer to perform with. We're going to record some motion recording here as well, but I have lots of things going on that I'd like to walk through. Each channel is a different triangle wave oscillator, playing a different pitch, and I'm using different envelopes here controlled by sequencing channels to create these rhythms. Voice 1, channel 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now my auxiliaries are set to both pre and post. X is post, and that's a delay. So if I then mute these channels, my delay will play. and then die away. And send Y is a reverb that's set to be pre, so the actual envelopes and rhythms on this modulation of volume don't have any effect. It's just a droning oscillator that's coming straight into the module. It's quite nice to play with the sends. Kind of fading chord tones into that reverb. And that's something we're going to really enjoy with this motion recording. Now, separate to the module, I have a sub from my first voice, this one, playing into font. A little bit of vibrato on there, and a little bit of filter modulation. And that's been summed externally, that's not part of this mixer. I'm also using the cues to feed a tube distortion. Turning them on routes the cue out to this distortion that's modulated, and then that's summing externally as well. I'm playing with which voice feeds that distortion and this sub. So that's everything that's going on in the patch. Enveloped sounds, external sub, external dirty tube distortion fed by the cues, a pre-reverb send, a post crunchy delay send. Let's create some motion here, hitting record, and I'll play around with this voice by voice. So altogether, with this really interesting stereo panning going on, levels are adjusting a little bit, sends are being adjusted. Those motion recorders have created a beautiful amount of motion and life and animation to the patch. So here we're doing two things. Again, performing with the performance mixer, but I'm using the auxiliary sends as additional mono and or stereo inputs. So the patch started with a kick drum, which is font here, self-oscillating, envelope to the frequency, and an envelope into the channel, again as a kind of end of chain VCA. Channel 2 is a gritty, phase modulated FM style complex bass sound through a low pass gate. And these three orange cables are this ducking envelope, an inverted envelope playing off my kick drum that's offset, and these orange cables here are all being used to sidechain. Channel 3 is a mix of hi-hats through some delay. This is sidechained as well. And then the string sound here, which is just a saw wave through a reverb, 100% wet. That's where we really hear this sidechain. Really obvious pumping. Now my X input I'm using as a stereo additional channel with another synth voice through a low pass gate and through some chorus. The Y input I'm using as an extra mono input for this snare-like percussion, which just mixes into the rest of the percussion nicely here. And I should say the whole mix here is coming across into the C, E, EQ, where you can kill this with treble, mid and low bands, and a healthy amount of compression without any there. You can absolutely nuke it. A healthy amount of compression just to really fatten this up. Bit of top end and low end maybe. So here I've gone a little more extreme with my muting. Really kind of chopping the hell out of all these tracks. So I'm using these stepped sequences here to mute the channels. If I mute channel 1, the drums there, you can see the activity on and off. Channel 2. And what's nice is the mute buttons still override and completely mute everything. We're not fighting against our modulation here. Modulation of our plucked string. And our reverb. You can see the activity on these LED cables and over on data, and these are just muting while the voltage is held high. It's not triggered on and off. We can think of it as momentary. Any high voltage here will mute the channel. And again, you can still mute right there on those buttons. So here I've patched up some kind of retro sci-fi alien critter landscape, and we're going to kind of do everything that we've done so far in the video. We're modulating level, we're going to motion record and loop the sends, panning and volumes here. Got two effects. FX is a delay, FXY is a reverb. And I'm going to mute modulate as well in these mute control inputs on the expander. The patch starts with my main sound here on channel 1. Let's add some motion to this. So it's already a much more detailed sonic landscape there with the panning, dual auxiliary recording to X and Y and level changes. So if you're into alien landscapes and retro sci-fi, there you go. Some unsynced mute modulation from slow and diode logic based LFOs, lots of motion recording, some volume control from different LFOs to start with as well. If you've got this far in the video, go drop a hard sync in the comments and let me know which one of those patches was your favourite and how are you going to use this motion recording and what would you like to try if you had these features at hand. You can support me and gain access to exclusives over on patreon.com/DivKid. Hit like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.